When you have very loose monetary policy internationally, we simply have to follow. We can't go increasing our interest rates when the Europeans or the Americans have very low interest rates, for example. So what I think is probably going to happen, the Reserve Bank locally is likely to keep interest rates very accommodative for an extended period of time. Even if we do get inflationary pressures, the Reserve Bank will maintain a very loose monetary policy stance. And in fact, a bit of inflation in the beginning of the cycle is likely to be good to the financial markets as well, except for the bond market perhaps. But for equity markets, some inflation is actually quite good. And on top of that, South Africa's nominal interest rates are relatively high. That gives the Reserve Bank some moving space, some dry ammunition to cut interest rates if necessary, if there is some sort of crisis. So from the monetary authorities internationally and locally, clearly they are there to support the financial markets. South Africa's fiscal policy. Well, South Africa is in a fortunate position is that our debt levels compared to many countries in the world, particularly the Europeans, are just dramatically better. Our debt levels relative to GDP is below 40%, and it's unlikely to exceed 40% by much over the short term, over the next 2 or 3 years. In fact, we at the Efficient Group is more positive and more optimistic about the outlook for fiscal policy over the next 2 or 3 years. So on the fiscal side, we are really in a very good spot, and fortunately for us, the Minister of Finance got low debt levels, which means that he can actually maintain a fiscal deficit. An unsustainable fiscal deficit over the long term, but in the short term, we can actually afford it, unlike the Greeks, to run a bit of a fiscal deficit. Another source of support to the South African economy. The real downside to the South African economy, however, must be that we have some uncertainty as far as monetary policy is concerned. I think that political leadership is not always clear on what our plans are in terms of the economy over the next couple of years, but my suspicion is by the end of this year, the political backstabbing will be out of the way and we will get stronger and more clearer political leadership from our political leaders. Unfortunately also, the South African economy is likely to perform quite weak, but economic growth can still be expected around about just over 2% or so for this year, and with a bit of an acceleration next year. We need to address issues like, for example, the strikes. We need to address issues like, for example, economic policies, because South Africa is a position where we can really make use of our position in a way between the West and the rest to benefit from the strong economic growth that can, or an acceleration in economic growth that can be expected from the Chinese and the Indians and like. And fortunately also for us, we've been expanding our trade relations with the rest of the world, and especially with the East. And South Africa being part of BRICS, for example, has proved that South Africa is taken seriously as a developing and a very important developing economy in the rest of the world. Although South Africa is a relatively small developing economy in the world, we can contribute so much to BRICS, for instance. South Africa's financial markets are very, very liquid. South Africa's financial markets are very, very well regulated, and South Africa's financial markets are very much integrated with the rest of the world. And those are the kind of contributions that we in South Africa can make to the rest of Africa, to the other emerging economies, and to the rest of the world. South Africa's got a bright future ahead of us, if only we can get some more clarity on the political leadership situation and more clarity on economic policy in the country.